Cincinnati's ready for the Big 12. How much time is it?
I am fired up.
It's a blessing to be able to be in this league with y'all, putting on for UC.
Cincinnati, a basketball school.
And there he goes. Touchdown, Bearcats!
Brookwamba again, another slam inside.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the GoBeercats podcast. I'm your host, Brandon, part of the Catskeller Social Club, and we are on possibly our last stop on the Big 12 road trip that we started 8 weeks ago now. This is number 9. I told you guys that I probably wasn't going to do Houston because who knows where their fans are. We don't like Central Florida fans, so we don't need to hear anything else from them. And Oklahoma and Texas are on their way out, so what's the use of getting to know those guys? So I found 2 highly professionals. I'm anxious to learn their backgrounds here because their podcast is stellar. They will tell you where to find that here in just a moment. From the jump here, we have Dave McCann and Blaine Fowler from the Wise Guys podcast and live show. I'm not sure where that comes in, but gentlemen, welcome into the podcast. How are we doing tonight?
Brandon, it's great to be with you. I don't know why we're last. Why are we last?
Yeah.
You had all those others before us, but sometimes last is best.
Yeah, it's all good. So you were asking where the live part comes. So we do a live stream show, live video stream show every Tuesday night from 6 to 8 Mountain Time, and it's on multiple platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and on our website at ysguys.com. And it airs all over the world. We have people that listen in South Korea and in Japan and Panama tonight and Australia, and then all over pretty much every state in the United States listen in. And then it re-airs as a podcast or as a live, or as a stream, a video stream the next day on all those platforms and in any podcast forum that people may follow podcasts. So that's why we say it's a live show on Tuesday nights that's followed up. And they can go get it anytime they want.
And the reason we do it is to, and these are obviously BYU fans, and the Cougar Nation, as you know, is all over the place, church and everything around the world. But we thought it'd be cool for a night to just open it up and have people be able to ask us questions. So we started with a live stream and a podcast. And the 2 of us have been calling BYU games for over 3 decades. As a play-by-play guy in the Carolinas, we called the game when the Bearcats were here last. Few years ago, and so it's a great forum for us to just visit with fans and kind of do what you're doing, just keeping people, they want access, and we try to give it to them.
Yeah, and Dave and I both started our whole careers have been in traditional linear broadcasting. Dave actually started his career at Good Morning America after winning a student contest, and then was the sports anchor and sports director at KLES in Las Vegas and the voice of the UNLV Rebels for football and basketball for a lot of years. And so along with all of his studio work, was calling all kinds of live games. And he and I have worked together on a lot of live stuff. I started my career, I played quarterback at BYU from 1981 to 1985. So I was here.
What happened in 84?
In 84, we did win the national championship when I was playing here. So that was kind of a fun deal. And then I started on a career as an analyst at first, then started to do a lot of studio stuff. And I called football and basketball for NBC, ESPN, CBS Sports, and done national games and all that. And then Dave and I have partnered up on BYU TV, which is available in 65 million homes, and have worked together for more than 30 years calling games together. And we've also called games for ESPN together, and we've called games for UNLV together. And so we've been doing this for a long, long time together.
Awesome. That is good stuff. Like I said, professional of the professionals here. I got that right away when I was, doing some background on your guys' show. Now, gentlemen, this is the GoBeercats podcast. So, before I get too far into everything here, I do have to mention one of our sponsors for this season, which is the Delhi Liquor Store. They are your one-stop shop for drinks, wine, bourbon, cigars, whatever you need for whether it's game day or anything in between. This is the beer that I'm drinking here. I thought since we're both cats related, this one, not quite a Bearcat, but it certainly is a Thundercat maybe here. So it's a little IPA I'm drinking on as we go down this journey of learning about BYU.
We're going to chase some waters and some Diet Coke.
Do they sell Diet Coke at the place? I'm sure
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. You're dealing with BYU guys, so it's water and Diet Cokes out west.
It's all good here tonight. What I wanted to ask you guys, though, you gave us your background on, your professional background. I want to ask about the name of your show, the Wise Guys podcast. Now, I got to admit, I don't know if it was early in the morning when I was looking this up, but it took me about saying it out loud 3 times before I got it. And I'm sure that's just a me problem here, but I was like, Wise Guys. All right. Brigham Young's guys. I don't get it. And then I was like, oh, Wise Guys. Like, they're good fellas. One of us, like, is that where that play comes into, or how did you guys come up or arrive at that name?
So we were graduates of BYU, but a lot of times people say you went to the Y, and it's not Yale, but BYU. And when you come out here, you'll see a big Y up on the mountain.
Okay.
And, so we went with Wise Guys. One, because it makes people sound like we think we're smart.
We might actually know something, that we've
Right.
tricked them to think that over the years.
But the Wise Guys it's the letter Y apostrophe S guys, because we to our fan base, we're their guys. We've been doing it for so long, so we went with Wise Guys.
And it's interesting that you note that the people that are familiar with BYU, for some reason, in the distant past, long before Dave and I, so this is more than 35 years ago, their emblem has always been their middle. And so it's Brigham Young University, BYU, but you'll notice the stretch Y on the helmets. Like all of their uniforms have the Y integrated, and the Y is the feature. And I don't actually know the history of that. But they do refer to it as, they call the University of Utah up the road the U. So you go to the U, or did you go down to the Y?
Oh, okay.
And so everything is like, all the gear has like Y on the hat, whatever. And the Y is always the part that's emphasized. Even when they show BYU, the Y is bigger than the B and the U.
Very good.
So that's it.
That's how we got it.
That's us. We're the Wise Guys.
Very nice. So I want to kind of talk to you guys more about like the broader conference, what's going on. There's a lot going on right now. Colorado just deciding that they'll come back to the Big 12 after next year. And by the time this airs, who knows, we might have 1 new school or 2 or 3. So we'll touch on that a little bit later here. But I kind of wanted to know, what is the BYU's fan, what is their perspective on joining the Big 12? For Cincinnati fans, 10 years ago when we thought we were going to go, we were excited, ready. It seemed like we were always clamoring to try to get to a power conference, if you will. But with BYU being independent, did they have the same outlook? What's their sort of mentality coming in?
We've been wandering the desert for 12 years as an independent, dreaming of this day. I mean, that's why they went independent, is to get away from the Mountain West Conference. Remember, Utah had gone to the Pac-12, TCU had gone to the Big 12, and BYU was like, well, we're not staying here, and we wanted more access to our product, our games, and BYU TV had a lot to do with the reason why we've got this networks around the country, but we can't show any of our stuff. And but the real purpose was, how do we put ourselves in a position to get to the big time? And it took 12 years.
Yeah, and independence was a good move for BYU. They were able to monetize it in a way that they never could in a G5 conference. So BYU as an independent was making significantly more than revenue shares that a Mountain West or an American Athletic Association, an American Athletic Conference, than those schools were making. Cincinnati fans are familiar with the limitations that you have in terms of revenue from a contract like that. BYU is unique. They were only other school outside of Notre Dame that had a national network contract with ESPN to do everything. And so BYU was playing 10 to 11 games a year in football on the motherships, like either ESPN or ESPN Plus or ESPN2. These weren't stream games. These were all linear over-air games. So exposure was good for them. It allowed them to schedule more P5s. We look back 2 seasons ago. BYU fans will claim that BYU won the Pac-12 championship because they played 6 Pac-12 teams, went 5-1, and beat the Pac-12 champ. They're like, hey, we need to hang a banner, right?
And some of us did.
And some of us hung a banner that said Pac-12 champs. And so they've been playing 5, 6, 7 P5 schools a year, which is more than you can as a G5. All of that was good and prepared them. But what was missing was natural rivalries, being part of a league that helps you with scheduling year in and year out, having a bigger revenue share. Being in a P5 is going to be another major jump for BYU financially. and to have something to play for a conference championship in all of this, especially in football. Now, in the other sports, BYU primarily competed in the West Coast Conference. So in basketball, they're the same conference with Gonzaga. They had a conference. But in football, it really was a move to give them the opportunity to upgrade what they were doing, to have more finances, to compete on a higher level, to prepare for the day to get into a Power 5 conference. So everybody's pumped about it. Everybody's thrilled about it. They're thrilled to be back in the mix of playing for a conference championship and develop rivalries again. Some to renew rivalries. TCU was a big rival of theirs in the Mountain West Conference. So to renew some of those and to really have something to play for every week that you really don't when you're an independent.
Very nice, very nice. So you kind of took my next question. I thought I was going to ask: is there any early candidates for that natural rival that you were speaking of that BYU didn't have? And it looks like that answer is definitely TCU.
It could be TCU. I ran into Houston's coach in the men's room at Cowboy Stadium when we were down there, and we were washing our hands and looking at each other. And he had just gotten off the platform where he had addressed all the print media, and he goes, "Wow, how did I do?" This is Dana Holgerson, and he goes, "I say anything controversial?" I'm like, "What do we care? If we're new, just like you guys." And I think Houston is a unique thing. BYU's played them a couple of times, but the church is so strong and prominent in the Houston area. When BYU has been down there a couple of times, sold out half their stadium. And those people live there. And Dana said, he goes, "You know what? You're right. You guys should be in Houston because of the fans there." So there's a chance for that one. I like Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado now gives BYU – there's going to be travel partners in the league. Colorado's a natural rival. They have some history. That would make sense. And, before this is all said and done, and you mentioned that this won't air till later this week, hey, you could have Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, and Arizona in the league before this thing's all said and done, the four corner schools. I'm not saying that's going to happen. That is a possibility at this point with the Pac-12 deal announced today, which is mostly streaming, all streaming really, as the primary source of distribution. Now, if that happens, Utah's BYU's biggest rival, whether in a league together or not, and vice versa. And Kyle Whittingham, who's my old roommate and teammate, that Utah's head coach, tries to downplay it. But he even knows that BYU is a bigger rival to Utah than any USC or UCLA game. And that's just a matter of fact. So if that were to happen, then immediately Utah would be. One school that has had some recent games with BYU and has some potential is Baylor. Yeah. Baylor's a religious institution like BYU. They've played each other the last couple of years in football. They've played in the past in basketball. The university presidents know one another. The ADs know one another. Similar fan bases. And so that's one to me that has some potential. And the two coaching staffs in football are very close. Dave Aranda and Colin Satterfield know each other well. Multiple coaches on those staffs have coached together. Dave has a couple of offensive line coaches that coached at BYU previous to coaching at Baylor. And so that is another one that would lend itself to being a good rival for BYU. So Baylor, TCU, they've been a rival before. Baylor's got potential to be a new rival. And then, heck, there could be some newcomers in the league in the coming weeks that could change that as well.
You guys don't care much for Xavier, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
So
that's Utah and BYU. Yeah.
So you can relate. You don't have to be in the same league to get after each other.
No. Being in the same city's enough. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we don't need to touch that yet. I'm not ready for basketball smack talk. Not yet. There's Xavier fans on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it tonight that I almost had to respond to, but I was like, you know what? I got this interview. I got to focus on football. Forget them for a little while.
They'll be there. They're waiting for you.
Yeah, always. You bring up Dana Holgerson, and it was kind of funny because last year, I think it was last year, during the American Media Days, it was, of course, over Zoom, not live and in person. But I had, I'll never forget this because I had my wife I said, pretend that you don't know these guys coach football. Just looking at them, what would you guess their profession is? Right. So there's a couple good ones, but Dana Holgerson, she said he looked like a gas station attendant. So I thought that was one of her funny ones.
flips it around. He wears his hat down low and has a raspy voice, but he's a lot of fun.
And he knows offense. He really can. He can put together some teams that are pretty prolific on the field, and their ability to move the ball up and down and score. That's for sure. Which is going to fit in really well in this league.
Yes, for sure, definitely.
And that's a basketball program right now too. So Houston's a great addition.
Definitely. They just maybe some more fans will start to show up now. We'll see. Out of all the fans I've interacted with, Houston's been probably the least amount online. Maybe they're somewhere. We'll find them. Maybe they're just they're the BYU fans taking over. That's fine too. I want to ask you guys, as we get closer into, or now definitely, I mean, camp for most teams starts very soon here for football season. Can you guys sort of paint a picture of what Provo was like on game day, and maybe some game day traditions that if a Bearcats fan is traveling out there, what would they see throughout the day?
Some of those guys might have already been here. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the Bearcats have been here before, but
yeah.
We had Commissioner Yormark here for the Baylor game last year, and we do a 2-hour pregame show on BYU TV out with the fans, kind of like game day. We call it game day. It's kind of after that mode, and he looked around at the setting and the stadium and the crowd and just thought, wow.
Yeah, he said, "Is this like this every week?" And we said, "Yeah," and he said, "Wow. This is quite the environment for a home game." And remember, it's a I can't remember what it seats now. When I was playing, it seated 66,000. We never in my 5 years here, we sold out every single game. And what they've done is, like in all stadiums, they've replaced some of the bench seats with more luxurious chairs and added some things like that. So they brought attendance down. Do you know what it is now, Dave? It seems like it's
62,
62, 63.
Like,
so it's down a few thousand to accommodate that. But you can bet that these games, all these Big 12 games, will be sold out. So it's a great college football environment, and it's one of the loudest stadiums that fans will experience in the country, really, because of the way it's configured. Interestingly, the University of Utah had some coaches that were coaching there that coached with Kalani Sitake, BYU's head coach, that are now down coaching with BYU. Soni Pua, the defensive line coach, has been the defensive line coach at the University of Utah for a lot of years. And Justin Anna, who's the linebackers coach, coached at Utah for a number of years. Aaron Roderick, who's the offense coordinator, coach at Utah for a number of years. So they've played all over the Pac-12, played at USC and on a full house when the Trojans have been really good, played in Autzen at Oregon. And when we asked those guys what's the loudest stadium they've ever played in or coached in, they immediately just said, "Oh, BYU, it's not close. It's not close." So it's a pretty cool environment. But it's also an environment that's really gracious to visiting fans. Visiting fans will get welcomed. Some games they take ice cream up to them. They'll be treated with tremendous respect.
Probably won't hear a swear word.
You won't hear any swear words. There won't be a bunch of drunk people around them. And so they'll have visiting fans always give us feedback that they have a very cordial experience. Now, down on the field, it's not cordial. Because when the game gets tight, those fans get really loud. And we were down on the field involved in our broadcast when BYU played Arizona State in a night game here a couple years ago. And it was so loud. We were closer than we are right now together. And we were screaming face to face in each other's faces to try to hear what we were saying. That's how loud it was. You couldn't even hear 2 inches apart screaming at the top of your lungs. And it's got one of the great student sections in the country.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a great place for a football game. And Brandon, just between the three of us, we're supposed to have Air Force jets flying over on the 29th after the national anthem, but the game is late, and so they're trying to negotiate with the government to let the jets fly a little bit later than normal.
Okay,
that's off the field stuff. Getting ready for the Big 12 home opener with Cincinnati. And so when you see those jets fly over, just know that it's a result of long negotiations to try and get those guys flying over.
At the Air Force, the public relations officer that's responsible for flyovers all over the country is a BYU grad.
Okay.
Yeah, and so BYU gets a little access to some.
So we got don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody.
We got that going for us.
But the one of the largest wings of the new F-35 fighting jet is right here at Hill Air Force Base in Utah. So we usually get some F-35 information flyovers here. which is cool. The stadium sits right up against the mountains.
Yeah.
And on the north end of the stadium, there's a almost 12,000 foot peak called Mount Timpanogos. When these jets fly over, they come right over the stadium, and then they have to literally bank and go straight up to not hit that mountain as they're going out and making their way back north up to Hill Air Force Base.
And nothing says big game more than Jets. And so that'll give you an idea how big a game this is for BYU to have the Bearcats coming.
Yeah. People are getting about that one.
That's going to be exciting because you guys go to Kansas first for your, I guess, inaugural Big 12.
Big 12 opener, right?
Opener. But then the home opener is the Bearcats on the 29th. That's a Friday, a 10:15 kickoff. Bearcats fans, I don't know if you've looked at that schedule yet, but that's an official 10:15 kickoff. So it's a night game that it's going to be wild, and I'm sure very, very loud, like you guys have described there. You know, what it was about 8 years ago now, 9 years ago. I don't know. I don't teach math. I teach history. But the Bearcats had the home and home with BYU, lost both of those games, both of them during the Tommy Tuberville era here in Cincinnati. And the 2016 game, I think that was the return game here at Nippert, Bearcats lost 20-3 in what I have dubbed the worst college football game that I have ever witnessed. Unfortunately, my whole family came down for that game, and we were bored. We were bored watching that brutality of a game. So hopefully, the first game was pretty entertaining. It was a little closer, but not being able to score a touchdown makes for a long afternoon, no matter where you are. So a lot of questions here going into the Big 12 for the 4 new incoming schools. A lot of fans that I've talked to around the league have said that they kind of expect BYU to be the best out of the new 4 in terms of, you know, where they end the first season, and I would probably agree with that. I'm certainly not going to pick Central Florida. So what do you think the BYU?
Wait a second. What do you got?
Yeah, there's some kind of not like Central Florida.
No, Cincinnati fans and Central Florida fans, we are at each other's throats all the time. So
is this because of recent? You know, Central Florida had a magical season and played really well, and Cincinnati's had multiple really good bumping up against that glass ceiling as G5s, where they really had a right to say, you know, hey, we're right up there and should be in the top 5, both schools, right? And I know Central Florida claims the
2017
their national champions.
Like an incident.
So is this you're at each other for that? Like, who's the best G5 in the last decade? And is
there's a touch of that for sure. You know, we've only played each other 8 times on the field, and it's 4-4. You know, it's deadlocked, and a lot of those games haven't even really been close. You know, when they were good in 2017, I think they beat us by 40. In 2021, when we went to the college football playoff, I think we beat them by 40. So it's a little bit of that. There's a handful of their fans, maybe even more of a handful, that proclaim that Bearcats fans should be thankful for their 2017 team that really put our 2021 team on the map and made it possible for them to go to the college football playoff. So there's no love lost there.
Yeah, you just played Central Florida in a bowl game a couple years ago down in the
Boca Raton.
Yeah, the Boca Raton Bowl. And that wasn't a boring game because my question was, do you think Central Florida will ever stop BYU in this game, ever? Because BYU just scored anytime they wanted to all game long and just ran them off.
We're happy to know we had your support that.
And I'm glad that Cincinnati was rooting for BYU that night.
The entire city, without a doubt. But what do you guys think? What's the sort of BYU expectation? What's the fans' expectations for year 1 in the Big 12?
Well, I'll go first, and Blaine will give you a player's perspective since he suited up. But I don't know if BYU will be the best of the 4 newcomers. There's so many question marks outside of Texas, you know, with all their 5 stars, and then Kansas State, who I actually picked to win the league. And then everyone else is about the same. It seems like maybe once you get past Texas Tech, anybody could finish 3rd to 14th. And, you know, BYU's picked 11th, you know, okay. Maybe if they were picked 7th or 8th, 9th, or 13th, it'd be about the same because of the uniqueness of no one really knows. But they go in healthy. They've had a big offseason in the portal. They got a quarterback who's had 34 P5 starts under his belt. So while the program's new to the P5, the guy with the ball isn't in Keaton Slovis.
Yeah, former Pac-12 player of the year.
So there's optimism here. And over the course of independence, BYU's tried to schedule as many P5s as they could. So they've really spent 12 years getting ready for this 1 year. And that might be different from some of the other schools who had to play conference games, 9 or 10 of them. But the optimism here is it's interesting because this is a road BYU's never gone down. They never played 10 P5s in a row. And so once you peel that back, you go, I'm not really quite sure what's going to happen.
And to me, it's interesting, Brandon, because let's go back to 2 years ago. They played 7 P5s, but they also played some of the premier G5 programs in the country that year. So when you're playing Boise State in Boise, or when Cincinnati was a G5, you're playing Cincinnati at Cincinnati, or you're playing UCF at UCF,
or Coastal Carolina
when they were ranked in the top 10. Yeah, that's a G5 game, so you didn't play 10 P5s. But I would submit that those teams in some of those years are better than the bottom half of the Big 12, as P5s are the bottom half of the the Pac-12 or the Big 12, or maybe not the bottom half of the SEC. But so I think BYU's prepared, and BYU had one of the best years in the portal of any team in the country, and they had some needs, and I think they really filled them in a big way. They had some losses on the offensive line, but they filled those. BYU's 5 starters on the O-line will all be multiple year starters at big-time P5 programs that are all starting on that front line. Big, nasty, physical, bunch of 320-pound nasties up there. I feel like BYU up front will match up with anybody in the Big 12 this year. BYU, even in independence, no matter who they're playing, we go to a game, the opposing coach goes, well, I'll tell you one thing, they look like a P5 team up front. These guys are giants up there. They're big and physical. And this may be BYU's best offensive line in the last 10 years. And if that's the case, then I think BYU has a chance to be really good because they have really good skilled kids around that. And I feel like a lot of games are won up there up front. So I think people around here would be happy if they won 7 or 8 games this first year, finish 7-5 or 8-4 as they make that transition in. And I feel like people feel like they need to improve each year from there. They're used to them winning. Fans here are used to 10-11 win seasons. That's what you're supposed to do. But I think the fans are tempered in a little bit and a little realistic, going, okay, this is a different deal. This is week in and week out. You got to get up. There's not a lot of weak teams on the schedule. And so 7 or 8 wins would be great. In my mind, it's about health. So if you stay really healthy, because I feel like BYU's first 22 can compete with anybody, BYU just doesn't have the depth that a Texas or an Oklahoma or maybe even a Baylor has. And that's probably Cincinnati's issue right now and Central Florida's issue right now and maybe even Houston's right now. It's going to take these schools a few years to build the kind of depth that you can suffer a few injuries and still compete. If BYU stays 100% healthy, they could win more than 8 games. If they don't stay healthy, they could win less than 7, right? And so to me, health at key positions is a big, big deal.
And Brandon, here's one of the misconceptions we want to clear up tonight. Coaches always say, and fans and media, when BYU comes to town or whatever, that they're older because they're, they've been on mission trips, which aren't trips.
Yeah, they don't get to work out while they're there.
And they're all 26. So usually when they get beat, coaches are like, well, they're all, they're so much older than my guys. The average age for the football team is 21. So there are some older guys that have been on missions and redshirted and have COVID years still, but there are guys that are fresh out of high school. And so when people say, well, BYU's, their advantage is that they're bigger and older because they've gone on missions. The average age is 21. And so sometimes when you get beat by the Cougs, you get beat by kids. And then there's sometimes you might come across someone who's 26.
Yeah, it's always been funny to us, Brandon, because BYU has had very few down seasons in the last 30 years, right? They're perennially double digit is always the bar for them, has been. And that changes a little bit now, of course, in a P5 conference. But they had a couple of off seasons. Nobody talked about. They were going, well, maybe the mission thing's not good. They're getting a lot of injuries during these years. Is that because of the mission thing? And then they bounce back and have a couple of really good years, and everybody's talking about, well, because the mission thing's this huge advance. I'm like, well, it wasn't when they won 6 games. Right. And so it really, really isn't a factor. And they were probably about the same average age as almost everybody they played last year. So that's not as big a deal as people think. And and they do have to manage these kids when they come back from a mission. Kalani tries not to play them the first year back because they're at a higher risk for injury because they haven't been doing anything for 2 years. So
now, kind of maybe one thing that people would consider a disadvantage is that BYU travels the furthest out of any Big 12 team this year. If I have this number right, it's over 6,500 miles. Now, is that with the scheduling, that the freedom that they had in years past, does that seem high, or is that sort of something that they're used to? Do you see that affecting them at all?
4,000 miles are for the West Virginia game.
Yeah, it's right. It's kind of the norm for them in the last 10 years. However, there is a strong correlation between playing on the East Coast, all the way on the East Coast, and playing Midwest to West. They fared much better as a winning percentage when they're not going 2 time zones east to play. So you can say, yeah, they've done that a bunch, but they haven't been as good. Now, the last couple of years, they've been good. Yeah. When Zach Wilson's starting a quarterback, and you have Tyler Algier at running back, who was a 1,000-yard rusher as a rookie last year, doesn't seem to matter when you go to the East Coast when you have those guys, right?
Big offensive line.
Yeah. So maybe it's just.
But I think
athletes.
In football, I don't think it's that big of a deal because it's one game,
right?
And the world's so small now with jets and all that stuff and charter flights and things. In the other sports, Olympic sports, even basketball, I think that's going to be a much bigger deal.
Yes.
When you're playing multiple games on road trips and you're away from home, and so it's a giant conference. Might get bigger, and all that stuff with expansion, but. For the one game a week, even in the Big 12, a Big 10 with USC going back, that's not that big of a deal. But you play Thursday, Friday, come home and play a Thursday, Friday. Now you're back there Thursday, Friday. I think that's when we'll see.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see that balance, Brandon. How much does the road wear on them, and how much does home pay off? They've been really, really good in football and basketball in LaBelle Edwards and the Marriott Center, and part of that is teams coming to elevation and trying to run up and down. And you come and play at 5,000 feet. Like nobody in this league, except for now Colorado, right? They do as well. But nobody plays at a mile high in elevation. And there's something to that. BYU's always felt like they get a team to come from the Midwest or especially from the East Coast that has to travel far, especially play a night game at elevation. If they can be in the game, either winning or close, going into the fourth quarter, BYU always feels like these guys will wear down and we'll be able to make more plays because they're not used to playing at 5,000 feet. And it must have some impact, plus that home field advantage with that crowd because their winning percentage at home is significantly better than on the road. And so is there enough of an advantage at home to offset the disadvantage on the road? That'll be interesting to see in this conference because they're going to be traveling east a lot.
It'll be when the Cincinnati game rolls around, the Bearcats will be playing at 1 a.m.
Right.
In the third quarter.
1 a.m. at 5,000 feet in front of 63,000 fans screaming so your head's spinning. That's not a fun. It's not a fun place. It's a fun place for fans. It's not a fun place to be on the field. Arizona State was playing in that night game. Critical drive. They get the ball right down in front of the student section and have 4 straight false starts because they can't hear themselves.
Yeah, turn that change.
Then they had to punt the ball. And BYU went down and scored at end of the game. And the student section is like, yes, we won that game. They think they won that game. Yeah, which, you know what? You got to give them a hand. They did.
Give them the game ball. Why not?
Yeah, for sure.
Now, you guys I've kind of brought up basketball. We can sort of transition over to basketball season. I don't remember if Bearcats fans, how the layout goes, if it's a home and home or what. I don't have that in front of me, unfortunately. But I have, like you said, the Marriott Center there is 19,000 strong, which is decent sized basketball arena for sure. 19-15 last year with wins over Dayton, Creighton, and Utah. Got to throw the Utah wins out there, of course. And you brought up your playing in the West Coast Conference, so you're playing the Gonzagas, you're playing the St. Mary's. How does that the conference experience translate over to now the best basketball conference in the country?
Well, BYU's coming from the WCC where they took 5th place the last 2 years. This is a different program.
Very different than football.
From the years past when they've had a lot of seniors and players that have been here a while. So when the preseason poll comes out, they'll be right near the bottom, if not at the bottom.
Where we would vote them, by the way.
Yeah. And so it's all straight uphill. The head coach, Mark Pope, refers it to climbing Mount Everest. Not everyone climbs Mount Everest or makes it up there or makes it back.
Sometimes they run out of oxygen on the way up.
And so the fans here look at Big 12 basketball, and the Matrix came out, so they have an idea of where they're going. Cautiously optimistic to compete, and knowing that you don't have to beat everybody to still make the NCAA tournament because the RPI is so high. But it's going to be a mega challenge, especially early, while BYU tries to figure that all out. Fans are much more optimistic about football competing right away than basketball.
And I'll say this, Brandon, that we talk about expectations. In basketball, they were on a great run there, playing in NCAA tournaments and winning 20-plus games for years and years and years, like a decade in a row. And so this season last year, 19-15, it was unacceptable in Provo. And that's in the WCC. Now, the fans have been more realistic. They look at that basketball conference in the Big 12, recognizing it's not even close, the best basketball conference in America. Like, it's not close. The SEC, the Big 10, no, not close, right? And so nobody expects BYU to go on a 20-game season string here anytime soon. But they do feel like basketball doesn't take as many pieces to move from just okay to competitive. And they haven't been recruiting. BYU in football has been recruiting P5 players saying, we're playing USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Michigan this year, and we're on ESPN every single game, 10 games. We're on national television more than Ohio State this year. Come play football. And they could get some of those guys. They have those guys. In basketball, it's been we play Gonzaga and St. Mary's, great but we do go on the road and play Pepperdine, where there'll probably be 400 people there.
Although Malibu is our favorite.
It is a great place. We do love the road trip. But there's nobody there at the game. You'll have 10 times more fans there than they will. You're playing in San Francisco, which is a storied program, but maybe 800 people will come. Like, it's not the same, and they've had a harder time landing the type of talent. But they're in the Big 12 now, right? And now they're going to be playing against NBA guys week in and week out, and they're going to have exposure. And Mark Pope's a tremendous recruiter, so people have hope that even though they have very low expectations for their first season, that in a matter of a couple of seasons, he can bring some bodies in to compete in that league that will make them competitive. And in the WCC, you don't get to 23 wins. You're not going to the NCAA tournament because the strength of schedule is just not good enough in that league. You win 18 games in the season in the Big 12, and you're in the NCAA
maybe
tournament.
even 16 and 12.
Sometimes you can be sick. And so people don't have this like, hey, we're going to come unseat Kansas or even Houston for that matter, who's coming in, or Baylor or any of those. Kansas State's been really good. I mean, this is a really, really good basketball league. But I think people feel like Mark Pope, with the ability to recruit to this league, can be in the upper half of the league in a couple years.
Very nice. While you guys were talking there, I did find the Bearcats matrix for basketball, and BYU is one of our away-only games. So
well.
And basketball will both take the trip out to Provo this year.
Players will love playing in that arena. It's a close confines, 19,000 people to the rafters, really loud, a lot of history. But what they won't like is when they get into that second half, late into the half, running up and down that court at 5,000 feet.
Or shooting into the student section.
Shooting into the student section, which is nuts. I don't know how anybody even can make a free throw shooting into that nonsense.
Always tough there. Now, see, last week I talked to some guys from TCU, and kind of to my surprise, I asked them, I always ask everyone, what is the third sport at your school? And they were kind of debating because two of them said basketball was the third sport and baseball is actually the second sport there. And I learned something new there. It's kind of, why I'm doing this series. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Do you guys consider basketball the second sport? And if so, is there a third sport that people pay attention to at BYU? For
fan interest, I'll let Dave answer. For fan interest, basketball is clearly number two. But BYU competes for national championships every year in a bunch of sports. Like BYU may be favored in a couple of sports to win the conference next year. Like women's soccer just played a national championship game 2 years ago. They're a perennial top 5 team. So that's a very, very good. They expect to compete for the league championship this year. They're preseason nationally ranked right now, number 13.
Nice. And they play they average over 4,000 fans a game.
Yeah, it's
soccer,
a phenomenal environment,
which gives you a home court edge.
Best home attendance in Western United States for women's soccer. Women's volleyball probably will be picked to win the Big 12. They've been ranked. They're
right behind Texas is defending national champs. Right behind Texas.
Yeah, so they'll be number 2 behind Texas in the league. Bowl. They've been to I don't know how many straight Sweet 16s, and they're a nationally ranked program. BYU's cross country programs have recently won national championships. They're never out of the top 3 in the country in men's and women's cross country. Track and field,
makes sense. They're just running up and down mountains all day.
Yeah, mountains, right? Track and field are both top 10 programs. They have multiple people will be competing in the Olympic Games. And so a lot of these Olympic sports, BYU, that's one of the reasons the Big 12 came to BYU. They're like, yeah, they'll compete in football, and they've been independent. Basketball's got a lot of history, and they can get up to snuff. But across the board, BYU is going to be one of the top overall programs right behind Texas, and Texas is leaving. When Texas leaves, BYU might be the best overall sports program when you just look at Director's Cup points year in and year out. Because they're always in the top 25 in that typically. So
and baseball's going to take a little while.
Yeah, baseball have not been as competitive as teams in that league have been.
But they got one of the coolest stadiums in America, so teams will love coming here and hitting into the mountains,
hitting right into the mountains,
all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, they're ready. They're Big 12 ready across the board, just in the marquee sports. It's it's just going to take a little.
It's a big adjustment in football and basketball. Probably a little less for football than basketball, but pretty much any other sport. Now, men's volleyball is not going to be in the Big 12 because men's volleyball plays in the Mountain Pacific Sports Federation. On any given year, 6 of the top 10 teams in the country are in their league. They play in a league with Stanford, UCLA, USC, Cal State Long Beach, Hawaii, and BYU competes for national championships in men's volleyball every year as well. So.
Very
yeah,
cool.
So the rest of the programs are Big 12 ready without a doubt. Women's softball is ready to go compete for a championship. So
except for once we get rid of Oklahoma,
Yeah, Oklahoma's got to go.
They seem to have the softball thing under control over there.
Yeah, we look at like beyond this next year when Texas and Oklahoma are out of the league. BYU can be very competitive for the top overall program in that league on a year in year out basis because of the strength of all the other programs.
Very nice. Now, is there a sport that BYU doesn't have, like a fringe sport that they don't have, that you would like to see them add now that they're going to the Big 12?
We don't really have a.
I'll tell you, they eliminated Title IX, eliminated
wrestling
a number of years ago, and there used to be a very good wrestling program. And I know all programs in the conference don't have wrestling. Yeah. I personally would love to see wrestling come back to BYU because they had a strong program in the past, and the Big 12 has some really good wrestling programs in it. That would be a fun one. But you'd have to have a corresponding women's sport. Right now, women's lacrosse is not NCAA. I would love to see women's lacrosse NCAA and men's wrestling back if they could add 2 sports to compete in the Big 12. That'd be really fun. That's my own personal opinion.
Very cool. Very nice. Gentlemen, I really only have one more question here left for you. Certainly appreciate your time. I know I've already learned things about BYU that I did not know, so hopefully Bearcats listeners here can agree with me on their newfound information here as well. But this is kind of a gambling question, if you will. And Dave, I know you kind of already tipped your hat to this question, but I'll let you kind of dive into it more here as well. So this gambling question.
If it's a gambling question, he lived in Vegas for 20-something years. Like he's
he's probably got the odds and everything down then.
Tell you where the restaurants are.
Yeah.
So this question is brought to you guys by the Bet Stamp app. It's not a sports book or anything, but it helps you line shop to tell you which sports books has the best odds, and it tracks all of your bets in one location for you. Download the app and be sure to use the referral code GoBeercats. Now, with that being said, if I gave you guys Texas and TCU or the field to win the Big 12 in football this year, who are you taking?
Take the field.
Because Dave already told you he picked Kansas State.
Here's why I don't think Texas is going to do it. I think they might have the best team and they might have the most talent, But this is the last shot they're going to get from the other conference teams that don't like them. And you're going to get a Herculean effort on back-to-back Saturdays from Kansas, Kansas State, Texas Tech, and just go on down the list. And I don't know, they haven't been able to withstand that without that mark on their back. And now here it comes. When I saw someone saying they're going to go 10-1 or 11-1, it's like, not in this league, not this year, not with that, because the gap isn't that far as we've seen in the last 8 years.
Yeah,
maybe longer since Texas has won the thing. But Kansas State was good last year, and they got a lot of guys back, so I voted for them. TCU lost so many. I think maybe it's Texas Tech's year. We hear a lot of positive.
Yeah, we've been talking about Texas Tech a lot.
So I'm going the field.
The Texas Tech might be the big sleeper this year up in Lubbock, because they won their last 4 last season. They really seemed like they were on a roll at the end of the season. They have 14 starters coming back. When you have a good quarterback coming back, that's always a big deal. So they return their guy. And they're number 2 in total offense last year, 461 yards. I just feel like Texas Tech may be primed to have their TCU of last year moment, right?
So you're going field?
So I would go field too, because I think Kansas State or Texas Tech could rise up and nip a stumbling Texas.
What about you, Brandon?
I'm wishy-washy on this. I'm not going to lie. I could see Texas finally not being, are they back finally? They've been not back for 10 years or something like that now. And watching them, I'm going off a very small sample size though, because I watched the Texas-Alabama game last year, and I thought Texas should have won that game if they had any quarterback with 2 good legs. That game that they just did not have that. And I thought they looked like the better team there for that one field, or for that one game on the field. So if they can put that together this season, I think they go 7-5 last year overall or something like that. And that's a different dynamic that I think is funny as well. But I agree. TCU, I think, has lost too much, but if I were to put money on it, honestly, I would take the field as well.
So I know Blaine and I look tremendously young, but we called Steve Sarkisian's games when he was here at BYU playing quarterback. Yeah,
he played quarterback here for BYU. So it's not like we're rooting against Texas, right? We love Steve.
Right.
But Texas just hasn't put it together. They
haven't shown us that. When I look at the rosters, I go, well, clearly Texas is the most talented team in the league. But you know what? There's been a bunch of years in the last 10 years when Texas has clearly had the best talent in the league and not won the league. And so it's almost like they got to prove it to me and go win it. I actually would love to see Steve win a championship with that group of kids. They're really, really skilled, but they haven't done it. That's why I put my money on the field. And I look at TCU last year. Nobody had TCU doing anything last year. No. And they got on fire, and they found a great leader in Max at quarterback. Sonny Dykes was inspirational to these guys. Loved what he did. And they win the thing, right? But man, Kansas State sure looked good at the end of the season last year. Yeah. And TCU loses a lot. So Kansas State may be next year's TCU. And I love the way they play D, which is not a great thing in this league, by the way.
So when BYU goes into Memorial Stadium at the end of October to play Texas, the fans there will first look to make sure Taysom Hill is not on the team.
He killed them.
Because he killed them twice. It was like 40-21 in Provo. The next year in Austin, it was 41-7.
He rushed for over 200 yards from the quarterback position, and they had to fire the D coordinator after the game.
They've never been the same since. So BYU may have broken Texas, and they're still trying to get back. But that'll be a fun night. The Cougars aren't afraid of Texas. Historically, they're like 5-1 against them, maybe 4-1 against them. But
they have winning record against Oklahoma.
They'll be underdogs rolling in there. But for some reason, historically, BYU gives Texas trouble. And we'll see in October.
Texas pushes a lot of people around in that league, and BYU's huge and physical up front. I don't think Texas likes that BYU can stand up to them and just be physical and master physicality up front. That doesn't sit well with them. And so it's a bad matchup for them.
And we usually get them early. Now we're getting them in October. We're not even sure what kind of team BYU is going to have health-wise.
The one thing that I did when I looked at the schedule, Brandon, I looked down and I went, oh, good. Kansas State's not on BYU's schedule. I was like, oh, check mark, advantage BYU. They don't have to play Kansas State. And that's good for BYU.
And Oklahoma's got to come in here on November 18th.
In the cold, at elevation. Yeah,
we like that. We like that match.
That'll be brutal. I might be on an island here, but I think Oklahoma is going to have another rough year, subpar for Oklahoma season.
No. I think a lot of people. Hey, how can Oklahoma? Brandon, Oklahoma was 122nd in the country in total defense last year. Oklahoma. How can you have those kinds of athletes and be 122nd in the country in total defense, and your head coach is supposed to be the defensive guru of all time, right? I mean, it's just, man, Texas just worked them over last year. It was embarrassing. So I don't know. They went 6-7 last year. Do they have a rebound year? I realized that when their coach left and he took a bunch of guys with him and the transfer portal went nuts. Can they recover from it? I don't know. I don't see Oklahoma winning the conference. I could see Texas doing it. I don't see Oklahoma winning.
What's pretty cool is we're sitting here having this discussion with the BeerCats, and the Wise Guys, and we're talking about Oklahoma.
Yes.
Because that's the world we're now in with Cincinnati and BYU and the Big 12. This is a conversation that's never once happened between us or ever in these fan bases. And now that we're both in the league, it's fun to sit around and go, man, Oklahoma's not very good this year.
Yeah.
You know, I think we got this shot at it. And that's how much our worlds have changed. And our two fan bases, for Cougar Nation for sure, they are out of their minds. They're just so excited to be.
We hope Cincinnati fans are as excited as BYU fans.
And we invite you all out to Provo.
Yeah, come out,
have a good time.
Come out to Provo. We'll treat you right. You know,
definitely.
We'll treat you right.
We kick off Big 12 play with Oklahoma in Nippert Stadium, so hopefully we can just bruise their ego right off the bat. And
what about
time?
You guys go undefeated and spank them, and we'll go spank Kansas, and let's play undefeated and be a national story for that night game on Friday.
There we go. I like it.
That'd be fun.
Gentlemen, this has been great. I certainly appreciate your time. I know we've already kind of set up something to collaborate again in the future.
Oh yeah, we're bringing you back on our show.
Yeah, that week of the you'll be here with us.
Yeah, so we have already did the home and home, so I certainly look forward to that. Hopefully, I can do Bearcats fans and everyone proud when I come on your show. If Bearcats fans want to look into your show, your podcast, or your social medias, where can they find you guys?
Find us at ysguys.com, wiseguys.com. We're also on Tuesday nights. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And we have a YouTube page where we'll slice up our show and have clips throughout the week. And then our podcast comes up every Wednesday from our Tuesday show, and that's available where you can get podcasts. So go Wise Guys, and then you should be able to find us. And it's been a lot of fun. Yeah,
and hey, Cincinnati fans, if you want to watch a fun show, Dave and I co-host a show called After Further Review. And next week on that show's available on BYU TV.
On the BYU TV
So you can go to the BYU TV app and just go AFR, After Further Review. Our next week's show for next Tuesday night, we're going to do a preview of every team in the league.
Okay.
So if fans want to go in and see what we say about Cincinnati, but we're going to preview every team in the league next week on that show. Well, we're going to do it, next week. Just give a little preview of who's coming back, what the expectations are. So if Cincinnati fans are like, oh, that'd be actually a good show to watch to cover the whole league, we're covering the whole league next Tuesday on that show.
And here's the thing. On that show on Tuesdays, through the season, like when we play Cincinnati on the 29th, the following Tuesday is a full hour of that game broke down, explaining what went right, what went wrong, and why. We call it explaining the game.
Okay.
And so we've had a lot of folks learn how to, hey, what a terrible flea flicker call. Why didn't that work? And then we can show them and educate them, and they become a better fan. And so we call it After Further Review because that's what the officials say after they look at a clip.
And our buddy Dave Nixon is a defensive mind, and he joins us on that show every week. And I kind of cover the offense. Dave covers the defense. Dave played with Houston in the National Football League with the Texans. So we do that every week. And it's kind of fun because we get fans coming from all over. We get fans that are coming on to watch the review of the game. Or sometimes fans come on and go, hey, we play Cincinnati next week. We need to go watch that show so we can see what Cincinnati's about. And so we'll get two different fan bases that usually will tune in for that show as we review and preview the games each Tuesday on that show. That one airs Well, it's available to live or to stream from at 5 p.m. Mountain on Tuesday nights, and that show leads right into this show from 6 to 8. So that's an hour-long show, and this is a 2-hour show.
Very nice. And right now, both of your shows are available in more homes than the Pac-12, so that's got to feel good as well. So
the AFR show is available in more than 65 million homes. So
definitely,
that's how we run in the West.
Yes,
absolutely. I don't know if I'll be able to make it out to Provo this year, but I have a buddy who is from Salt Lake City, and he's like, "You guys, we got to go out there to catch a game." So hopefully, I will here in the near future. So, looking forward to the collabs in the future. Good luck this upcoming season, and I'll see you guys.
We'll see you in September.
See you in September on the show. Thanks, Brandon.
Definitely. See you guys. Thank you.